Part 1. Mother and Son. On September 27th, 1601, King Louis XIII of France was born at the Palace of Fontainebleau. People across the kingdom celebrated his birth, hoping he would keep peace after decades of strife. During the 1500s, France fought the French Wars of Religion, where Catholics fought with Protestants, called Huguenots. These long and bloody wars ended in 1598, when Louis's father, King Henry IV, brought peace with the Edict of Nantes. The Edict of Nantes gave Huguenots many important rights. They were free to worship and build churches, keep soldiers in improved towns, attend schools, and hold government jobs. They still faced limits, however. Huguenots could not hold their own political meetings and had to respect Catholic holidays. Their books could be censored, and Huguenots had to keep paying church tithes. Many of France's powerful courts of law, called Parlement, strongly disliked the edict but had to accept it. France was very different from the country it is today. About 15 million people lived in the kingdom, speaking different dialects and following different customs. Society was divided into 3 estates. The first estate was the Catholic clergy, who owned large amounts of land and ran schools and charities on top of their ecclesiastical duties. The second estate was the nobility, who fought for the king, served in government, and also owned large estates. Everyone else, from the poorest peasant to the wealthiest merchant, belonged to the third estate. France was also changing. Ownership of land still made the clergy and nobles rich, but trade was becoming a bigger source of wealth. Some rich merchants and lawyers bought government offices, potentially leading to noble status. The nobility depended on income from land, and rising prices made that income worth less. At the same time, weak leaders, corruption, and disputes damaged the church's reputation and pushed people to support Protestant ideas in the first place. Doctors described the young Louis XIII as healthy, active, curious, and full of energy. Like his father, he loved hunting, war, and leadership. However, Louis was also often angry, stubborn, and emotional, a boy who hated losing and often lost his temper. Henry IV treated Louis with warmth and kindness, but he also used physical punishment when he thought it was needed. Louis's mother, Marie de Medici, acted in a calmer but more distant way. She wanted Louis to obey and preferred rewards instead of the whip. Even so, his parents often spoiled him as much as they punished him. When Louis turned 7, he moved to the royal court at the Louvre in Paris. There, he began to train for life as a king. His teachers gave him lessons in religion, history, morals, and writing. They taught him that a king needed courage, wisdom, fairness, and self-control. Louis also learned court manners, ran his own household, and practiced making decisions, preparing him for the future. Unfortunately, that future was not far. Like in France, Catholics and Protestants fought over religion in the Holy Roman Empire, while Spain and the Dutch continued the 80 Years' War. In 1609, French diplomats helped arrange the 12 Years' Truce, but Henry IV expected more fighting. A dispute over nearby Cleveburg made war even more likely, and Henry gathered 50,000 soldiers to intervene. But on May 14, 1610, his carriage stalled in Paris traffic on his way to join the army. A lone Catholic named Francois Ravaillac then jumped up and stabbed Henry 3 times in the chest, killing him instantly. The French monarchy believed that kings were chosen by God and that the royal line would continue forever. Thus, the 8-year-old Louis immediately became King Louis XIII. However, a child could not govern the country alone, so his mother, Marie de Medici, became regent until he grew older. Marie was the queen mother, but many people at court did not respect her. Daughter of the Grand Duke of Tuscany in Italy, Marie found French language and customs difficult. Marie loved Italian art and wanted to look like a powerful ruler. But she also strongly desired power and worked hard to keep it. After taking power, Marie confirmed the Edict of Nantes, but she stopped plans to fight Spain in Italy and reduced plans to interfere in the empire. Marie believed peace would help protect her son's future. She also used marriage to build stronger ties with Spain. She planned for Louis to marry the Spanish princess Anne of Austria, while Louis's sister Elizabeth would marry the future King Philip IV of Spain. This new friendship with Spain worried the Huguenots. The Spanish had previously supported Catholics during the wars of religion. Partisan influence at court had already weakened after Marie removed Henry's advisor, the Duke of Sully. In 1611, Huguenots gathered at Saumur and argued that the government had weakened the protections given to them by the Edict of Nantes. Marie rejected many of their requests for protections, but the meeting helped unite the Huguenots. They chose Henry, the Duke of Rohan, as a possible military leader if fighting broke out. While Huguenots met at Saumur, an Italian couple gained power at the French court. After Henry's death, France lost the strong leadership that kept personal interests under control. This allowed Leonora Galigai, Marie's childhood foster sister, and her husband, Concino Concini, to grow more powerful. Marie gave them wealth, titles, and important jobs. Concini became governor of areas in northern France and gained military and court positions. In return, he helped nobles gain rewards and pay supporters, including Barbin, Mangot, and Armand Jean Duplessis, the young bishop of Luçon, in key roles. At the same time, noble pensions became very expensive, reaching 4 million livres in 1611. Marie's government tried to control costs and limit the creation of new offices through the Paulette, but many powerful nobles opposed these changes because they feared losing money or influence. Nobles such as Conde, Conti, Bouillon, Longueville, Nevers, and Vendôme left the court. Henry II, the Prince of Conde, became the main leader of this opposition, especially after Louis lost his younger brother and Conde became second in line to the throne. Marie tried to calm the nobles by offering money, delaying the Spanish marriages, and promising a meeting of the Estates General. On September 27, 1614, Louis turned 13 and gained the legal right to rule France on his own. However, he still let his mother guide the government. The Estates General met in Paris later that year, but the meeting did not weaken the monarchy as Conde had hoped. The three estates wanted lower taxes, less corruption, and an end to the Paulette, but they could not agree on solutions. These disagreements limited their ability to challenge the monarchy. Instead, most representatives supported it, and the Estates General would not meet again for another 175 years. Many people thought the 14-year-old king looked weak because he liked simple hobbies. He enjoyed making desserts, building small forts, and creating toy cannons. Marie wanted to keep control, so she planned to place Louis around courtiers who had little power or strong opinions. One of these people was Charles d'Albret, the Seigneur de Luynes, a middle-aged minor nobleman. Louis grew quite attached to him, and their close friendship helped Louis gain more freedom from Marie and Concini, who tried to push Luynes away. Louis showed his resistance with silence and cold stares, which helped keep Luynes at court. Louis also prepared for his marriage to Anne of Austria, 4 days his senior and the daughter of King Philip III of Spain. He studied some Spanish and practiced writing. He was excited to meet Anne and eagerly rode ahead of others on their journey to Bordeaux, where he arrived on October 7th. When they met in November, it became clear that Anne was lively and fun compared to Louis's reserved and martial personality. But they shared kind moments. Louis gave Anne a feather from his hat, and she gave him a ribbon from her hair. Louis and Anne married on November 28, 1615, with Louis's sister Elizabeth also marrying Anne's brother Philip. The long celebrations and pressure of the new roles overwhelmed Louis. Their first night together went badly, and the two children did not sleep together again for 4 years. Louis continued to sleep alone, visited Anne only briefly each day, and the couple did not eat a meal together for 6 months. It did not help that many of her Spanish ladies-in-waiting had been replaced by French ones on suspicion of Spanish espionage. In 1616, Marie made peace with the rebellious nobles through the Treaty of Loudun. She allowed Conde to take control of government councils that handled justice and money, and he used this power for himself. Some of Conde's followers even discussed killing Concini, removing Marie, and controlling young Louis. On September 1st, Louis helped lure Conde into Marie's apartments at the Louvre. Guards arrested him at once. Concini, meanwhile, continued to gain great wealth, push away the king's advisors, and act like he ruled the palace. When Concini sought the rank of duke, Louis became so distressed that he collapsed with convulsions. Pamphlets mocked Marie and Concini, while angry crowds attacked Concini's home. Louis believed Concini had hurt the dignity of the monarchy. Several men close to Louis urged him to act. His friend Luynes, Nicolas d'Hôpital de Vichy, the son of the king's former governess, and Guichard de Dirigeant, an aide to Germain, planned to arrest Concini in Paris. Concini grew suspicious, used spies, and made lists of enemies, so the plotters feared he would attack first. Vichy asked Louis what to do if Concini resisted arrest. The 15-year-old hesitated, and then quietly accepted that he must die. On April 24th, 1617, guards stopped Concini at the Louvre. When they stopped him, he cried out, "Against me?" Vichy's men shot and stabbed him then and there. Concini's wife, Leonora Gallagay, was later executed for witchcraft. Concini's ministers, like Rabin and Mangot, were imprisoned, but the Bishop of Luçon was kept to be a mediator between the distrustful king and his mother, now exiled in Blois. Part 2. The Wars of Religion. Sire, at this hour you are now king, for Marshal Ancre is dead, said Colonel Ornano to His Majesty. Louis rewarded the men who helped remove Concini. Luynes especially became the chief court official and lieutenant general of Normandy. Before long, Luynes became just as powerful and self-serving as Concini. He gained a duke's title, large estates, military control, and strong influence over important appointments. In fact, Luynes gained so much influence that he got away with forcefully bringing a 17-year-old Louis to a room with Anne and closing the door. King Philip III of Spain celebrated the official consummation, hoping that his daughter would have greater influence over Louis and bear an heir. After this, Louis and Anne started to share a bed several times each week, and many people expected a son. Even so, Louis often chose to communicate with Anne by letter. At the same time, trouble grew in the Holy Roman Empire. On May 23, 1618, Protestant nobles threw 2 Catholic officials out of a window in Prague, Bohemia. The King of Bohemia was also the Holy Roman Emperor, and both he and Spain belonged to the Habsburg dynasty. Because Habsburg lands surrounded France, Louis saw them as a major threat. He could have used the revolt to weaken them, but he instead focused on problems closer to home. Marie once again tried to regain her power, and many nobles who opposed Louis supported her. Government officials and the Parlement backed Louis instead, especially because he restored the Paulette to win them over. The Bishop of Lausanne warned Marie that she would lose despite her resistance, and her army was defeated at Ponce-de-Ce on August 7, 1620. Louis then made peace with his mother and declared her innocent. While in the area, some of Louis's advisors wanted him to use the royal army to end Huguenot resistance in southern France. Louis still supported the Edict of Nantes, which tolerated Protestant worship, but he had wanted to end their political and military power for some time. The king had an issue with the small Protestant principality of Béarn. Henry IV promised to restore the Catholic Church back to Béarn, but he never did, so his son ordered its return in June 1617. Local Huguenot pastors refused to obey, so Louis led an army into Béarn after defeating Marie. Louis entered Pau without a battle on October 15, 1620, and officially added Béarn to France. Local leaders quickly accepted Louis's rule, brought back the Catholic Church, and let priests return for the first time in 50 years. This worried La Rochelle, the strongest Huguenot city. In November, Huguenot leaders illegally gathered and refused to make peace, asking England for help. Louis called this rebellion and charged them with treason. Huguenot strongholds were then attacked, with their walls torn down to stop future rebellions. His army captured Saint-Jean-d'Angely after a siege in 1621, but Montauban held out until disease, poor pay, and desertion forced Louis to leave. During the siege, Luynes died of scarlet fever, depriving Louis of his favorite minister and dear friend. In 1622, Louis began a new campaign. At Negrepolis, his soldiers killed many defenders and civilians. Royal forces later defeated the Duke of Soubise on the island of Ré, killing about 3,000. Louis then marched on Montpellier. Severely weakened, the Huguenots agreed to give up about half their fortified towns in October. Only La Rochelle remained as a major center of resistance. While Louis was away on campaign, Anne managed the kingdom. Anne disliked the strong influence that Luynes had over Louis, but she still became close friends with his widow, Marie de Rohan. Anne, Marie de Rohan, and their friends liked to joke, flirt, and enjoy court life. Anne saw this courtly flirting as harmless, but many people, like Louis, believed it encouraged bad behavior. In March 1622, Anne became pregnant. After a gala, Marie wanted to run through the halls of the Louvre for fun. Anne did not want to join, but Marie and another friend grabbed her by the arms and pulled her through a dark hall. Anne tripped on a raised platform and fell, and 2 days later, she lost the baby. Doctors could not prove the fall caused the miscarriage, but Louis believed it did. He blamed Anne and her friends, and believed he had lost a son. After that, trust between them faded. They still shared a bed at times, but their marriage never regained its warmth. At the same time, events in the Holy Roman Empire continued to worsen. In 1620, French diplomats arranged the Treaty of Ulm to stop the war in Germany from spreading, but it instead weakened the Protestants. This allowed Catholic forces to defeat the Protestants at the Battle of White Mountain in November. Spain also seized the Valtellina Valley in the Alps from the Protestant Griffin, who supported France. This gave Spain an easier route to move troops across Europe. In 1622, Louis threatened military action to defend the Griffin, but Spain sent papal troops to protect local Catholics and keep control of the mountain passes. After Luynes died in 1621, Louis promised that no favorite would ever control his government again. He tried to manage almost everything himself, but the work wore him out. He removed people he saw as dishonest, weak, or too independent. In 1622, the Bishop of Lausanne became Cardinal Richelieu, and Marie urged Louis to bring Richelieu back to the council. In April 1624, 39-year-old Richelieu returned after 7 years away. He quickly pushed aside weak rivals, including Finance Minister La Vieuville, and became the council's most powerful member. Before his arrest, La Vieuville had begun many projects. Richelieu took them over and reshaped them in his own way. Although Richelieu held one of the highest positions in the Catholic Church, he put France and Louis first. La Vieuville had sent French troops into the Valtellina to negotiate and pressure local leaders. The Cardinal refused to support the Valley's Catholics because he believed the Griffin had the legal right to rule the area. Another important plan arranged the marriage of Louis's sister, Henrietta Maria, to King Charles I of England and Scotland. They married by proxy in 1625. Soon after, the Duke of Buckingham came to France to discuss an alliance against Spain, but rumors that he flirted with Anne made Louis suspicious. Meanwhile, after the Duke of Soubise seized the islands of Ré and Oloron, Richelieu convinced Louis to make peace with La Rochelle. The Treaty of Paris in 1626 ended hopes for Huguenot independence. Soubise accepted a pardon, English support faded, and La Rochelle no longer threatened the crown. Strict Catholics called Devots criticized Richelieu because he attacked Protestants in France but still supported Protestant allies abroad. Anne and her friend Marie de Rohan joined these critics because they feared Richelieu's growing power. They supported Gaston, the Duke of Orleans, who was Louis's brother and heir, as Louis and Anne had yet to have a son. Richelieu supported Gaston's marriage to a wealthy noblewoman, which angered some nobles and Anne. Some people, including the Count of Chalais, even planned to kill Richelieu, but Chalais' uncle warned Richelieu of the plot. Richelieu went ahead with Gaston's marriage anyways, and later had Chalais executed. The conspiracy further damaged the trust between Louis and Anne, but Richelieu became more powerful. In 1627, Charles I decided to send troops to help the Huguenots in La Rochelle. English forces under the Duke of Buckingham were quickly pushed back, allowing Louis and Richelieu to then surround La Rochelle. Instead of attacking directly, they built a barrier in the harbour and blocked food and help from reaching the city. The population withered away from 27,000 to 8,000, and the city surrendered in October 1628. At the same time, Louis got involved in Italy over who should rule the Duchy of Mantua. He and Richelieu planned to push the Habsburg enemy out of the region, then focus on any remaining Huguenot strongholds left. Upon returning, the town of Prevas was destroyed after refusing to surrender. On June 28, 1629, the Peace of Alais ended the French Wars of Religion. The Huguenots could still worship, but lost their armies, land ownership rights, and political freedom. Part 3. His Red Eminence. Cardinal Richelieu was born on September 9th, 1585, in Paris, into an old noble family that had little money. His mother raised him and taught him discipline, hard work, and self-control. As a child, he studied writing, fencing, math, military skills, and good manners. He first wanted to become a soldier, but when his older brother gave up his job as Bishop of Lucon, Richelieu took it instead. His poor health, caused by severe headaches and possibly epilepsy, also made church life a better choice than military service. The Diocese of Lucon had weak church leadership because many people there were Huguenots. Richelieu repaired churches, settled money problems, improved church land and buildings, and lowered local taxes. His work made him known as an able and effective bishop. When Richelieu entered the service of Louis in 1624, Louis initially did not trust him because Richelieu had served Marie and Concini. Louis also feared that Richelieu might become too powerful, like Concini or Luynes. Luckily, they soon found that they worked well together. Louis focused on solving urgent problems, while Richelieu helped him plan ahead and change course when needed. Many people at the time believed Richelieu ruled France more than the king, but the two worked hand in hand. Louis held the final authority, and Richelieu applied political skill and careful planning to achieve their goals together. They sometimes disagreed, especially about war, but they always repaired their friendship. Even outside of politics and state building, the king and cardinal supported each other through illness and family troubles. Marie de Medici was the one to suggest that Richelieu be brought back to the royal council. It did not take long for her to want him gone. Louis trusted his mother with important work while he fought in wars and wrote to her often. Even so, he usually followed his own political views rather than her advice. He praised Richelieu's loyal service and reminded his mother that she had originally supported his appointment. Richelieu faced many enemies. He wanted their many rebellious nobles to start obeying the king and serve France instead of themselves. In 1627, officials arrested the Count of Bouteville and Chapelle for an illegal duel that killed a man. The king ignored calls for mercy and had them executed in June, a warning to all nobles that the law applied to everyone. After the Chalais conspiracy, Louis and Richelieu replaced doubtful advisors with loyal men. They removed Chancellor Lallique, an objector to Gaston's marriage, and chose Michel de Marillac. Louis also named the Marquis of Effiat to improve royal finances. Effiat used low-interest loans and new taxes to strengthen the kingdom. In 1630, Louis won early successes in Savoy, but disease, military problems, and political fights hurt the campaign. Marie de Medici and her allies blamed Richelieu and urged Louis to remove him. On November 11, 1630, Marie accused Richelieu of betrayal and insulted him. Richelieu begged for her forgiveness, but she instead called him an ingrate. Louis stayed silent and walked away, so Richelieu believed he had been fired. Then Louis ordered him to come to his hunting lodge at Versailles, where they spent hours discussing their plans for France's future. The king chose to keep Richelieu as his chief minister, even though it meant deposing his mother. The most powerful state in the world, wrote Richelieu, cannot boast of enjoying peace and security if it is not prepared to guard itself at all times against unforeseen invasion and sudden surprise. After the day of Dupes, Richelieu was more powerful than ever, and needed lots of money for his plans for the army and foreign affairs. The government raised money through loans, new offices, and the paulette, but these methods also worsened old problems. Taxes, especially the standard land tax called the taille, grew much higher. The gabelle, a salt tax, also brought in money but encouraged smuggling. War, debt, and a growing bureaucracy made life harder for many taxpayers. As an alternative to taxes, Richelieu wanted France to go rich through trade. France already produced food, wine, salt, hemp, cloth, and other products, but English and Dutch ships carried these goods, not French ones. To change this, Richelieu created trading companies, like the Company of 100 Associates, looking to influence the fur trade, as well as settle, in Canada. France also built colonies in Acadia, the Caribbean, South America, West Africa, and Madagascar. In these places, especially the Caribbean, early settlers grew tobacco and later sugar as slavery spread. However, these projects sometimes struggled because investors wanted profits while settlers needed help. Back in France, industries such as silk and cloth making grew in Lyon and Tours, and projects like the Brière Canal and better postal systems helped commerce flow smoother. Michel de Marillac proposed an official code of law, the Code Michel, that tried to limit private armies, illegal money collection, and rebellions among the nobles. But no one bothered to fully enforce the code, so it had little effect. During Louis's reign, French culture grew in many areas. Writers mixed Italian and Spanish imagination and spectacle with French logic and realism. François de Malherbe made the French language clearer by rejecting slang, outdated words, and regional expressions, while his admirer Théophile de Villon wanted poetry to remain natural and emotional. Meanwhile, Mathurin Renier's crude satire of urban life shocked readers. These works, with the exception of Renier's, were read in salons like that of Madame de Rambouillet. There, nobles and politicians valued elegant speech, refined manners, and careful conversation. Richelieu created the Académie Française in 1635 to guide and protect the French language. Louis supported the first regular French newspaper, La Gazette, to share government views. Playwrights such as Pierre Carnier wrote works that espoused Louis's beliefs in duty, honor, and self-control. Important advancements in science and philosophy were also made with René Descartes' Discourse on the Method, which focused on reason and the search for truth. Paris was alive as builders erected palaces, churches, squares, and bridges. Marie de Medici built the Luxembourg Palace, and Richelieu built the Palais Cardinal. French Baroque design used balance, order, and simple shapes, mixing French Gothic ideas with Italian influence. French painters were also quite active. Simon Vouet, a follower of Caravaggio, created bright, decorative works. Eustache Lesueur painted simple religious scenes, and Georges de la Tour used candlelight and chiaroscuro to show quiet, powerful moments. Philippe de Chapin showed the seriousness of his royal subjects, while the Luynes brothers painted ordinary farmers and workers with the same dignity. Elsewhere in Rome, Nicolas Poussin and Claude Lorraine created some of the greatest French art. Poussin showed order, balance, and ideas from antiquity, while Lorraine used nature and light to make peaceful, elegant landscapes. Following the fallout of the Day of the Dupes, Louis wanted peace in his family. He wanted Marie and Richelieu to work together, but Marie refused to cooperate. Louis wanted Gaston to stop causing trouble, but he made weak promises. He also hoped to improve his marriage with Queen Anne and have a child, but she stayed close to Richelieu's enemies. Louis said he would always support Richelieu because he believed he had served France well. When his family kept fighting him, Louis removed their friends and advisors from court. In July 1631, Louis sent Marie into exile a second time after she continued to refuse to cooperate. She decided to escape to the Spanish Netherlands, never again to return to France. Gaston also fled after Richelieu reduced his household income and joined Marie. At the same time, many judges and officials wanted the king to follow old laws instead of creating new offices and taxes. Most of them still praised Louis but blamed Richelieu, which helped spread the idea that Richelieu controlled a weak king. In 1632, Gaston invaded France with 5,000 soldiers and joined the Duke of Montmorency, who governed Languedoc in the south. Royal forces defeated them at Castelnaudary in September. Louis forgave Gaston, but ordered Montmorency's execution, a difficult decision as they had been childhood playmates. Louis also punished the Marillac brothers. Michel lived the rest of his life in exile, while his brother Louis de Marillac was accused of treason by an unfair trial and executed in May 1632, a stain on Louis's reputation as the Just. Part 4: War, Crisis, and Victory. During Richelieu's rise to power, the small partisan revolt in the Holy Roman Empire became a full-scale international conflict. In 1625, Denmark intervened to help the Protestants, but mercenaries led by Albrecht von Wallenstein defeated them. The Treaty of Lubeck in May 1629 ended Danish involvement, and Emperor Ferdinand II issued the Edict of Restitution, forcing Protestants to return Catholic Church lands and property in the empire they had taken since 1555. Wallenstein also attacked Stralsund, a port controlled by Sweden. This encouraged King Gustavus Adolphus to support the Protestants. Richelieu now saw a chance to weaken Ferdinand II, and sent French agents to work with the German electors. They convinced Ferdinand II to remove Wallenstein in 1630, just in time for Gustavus to land in northern Germany with 29,000 soldiers. On January 23, 1631, Richelieu gave Gustavus an annual subsidy of 1 million livres in the Treaty of Barwald. The Swedish army later defeated the Catholic forces at Breitenfeld in September, the first great Protestant victory of the war. Richelieu also focused on the Duchy of Lorraine because it controlled routes toward Germany and the Rhine. To add, Gaston had been a widower since 1627, and the sister of Duke Charles IV now sought to marry him. Charles IV also supported the Habsburgs, so Richelieu sought to cut out this potential tumor of Habsburg influence. In late 1631, French troops entered Lorraine and forced Charles IV to accept the Treaty of Vic. The treaty allowed French troops to move through Lorraine and limited Charles's ability to make harmful agreements against France. Gaston secretly married Charles' sister Marguerite anyways, and began his revolt as mentioned before. After Gustavus died at the Battle of Lutzen in November 1632, some Protestants wanted peace with Ferdinand. However, Richelieu feared peace would make the Habsburgs too powerful. Many also suspected Wallenstein planned to rebel against Ferdinand. Wallenstein asked France and Sweden for support, but assassins killed him in February 1634. Richelieu then decided France had to enter the war to stop the emperor from gaining more power. After Gustavus' death, Sweden created the Hellbrand League with German Protestant states in 1633. The alliance funded a Swedish-led army, but many German states began supporting France instead after Sweden lost the Battle of Nordlingen in September 1634. On May 30th, 1635, the Peace of Prague ended fighting between many Protestants and the Emperor, causing Richelieu to scramble to support any remaining resistance. France and the Dutch Republic also planned to divide the Spanish Netherlands, which would mean war with Spain. "There is no people in the world so little suited to war as ours," wrote Richelieu. In 1634, France only had about a third of the 150,000 soldiers it needed to fight. Richelieu had little faith in the quality of the army and distrusted the generals he had. The government also collected 57 million livres in taxes by 1633 and spent 33 million on war. Taxes would become more than twice as heavy in the following years, causing suffering and revolts like one in Bordeaux that year. Despite the unpreparedness, Louis declared war on Spain on May 19, 1635. A Franco-Dutch army of 50,000 invaded the Spanish Netherlands and won at Les Avines. However, French troops looted Tienen to the north, losing supplies and weakening their army to only 8,000 effective soldiers. France retreated, damaging relations with the Dutch. In fact, France was now so exposed that Cardinal Infante Ferdinand invaded in 1636. Northern French towns like Les Capelles, Les Catelets, and Corbie fell, while Imperial cavalry scouts approached Paris itself. Louis called up militias and royal guards, and even Gaston, who had opposed the government for years, returned with 4,800 new troops. By November, French forces defended Saint-Jean-de-Lens and recaptured Corbie. Sweden also struggled. only about 15,000 Swedish soldiers could fight effectively, while the country suffered from poor harvests. To keep Sweden in the fight, France and Sweden signed the Treaty of Wismar at the end of March, which renewed the earlier Treaty of Barwald. Sweden later won a major victory at Wittstock in October. In 1638, France tried to weaken Spain by cutting the Spanish Road, a route that they used to supply their armies across Europe. After losing at Nordlingen, Bernard of Saxe-Weimar joined France for money and land in Alsace. In June, he attacked Brisach, a fortress protecting the route. French forces defeated nearby relief troops at Wittenfire in August, and Brisach surrendered in December. France gained control of Alsace, but Bernard and Richelieu argued over who ruled it until Bernard died in 1639. However, France faced growing anger at home. The army expanded from fewer than 100,000 soldiers to about 250,000, but the country lacked enough money and organization. New officials, called intendants, took control of taxes, justice, policing, and army supplies. Peasants, workers, nobles, church leaders, judges, and princes, feeling the pressures of war, and some of whom used to have these responsibilities, protested. Major revolts, including the Coquins in the southeast, showed that many people believed the king's demands had become unfair. As explored previously, Louis and Anne's marriage had been growing weaker and weaker. By now, Anne believed he never truly loved her, and accepted his harmless friendships with women because they made him happier. Marie de Hautefort became his first favorite, but she remained loyal to Anne and often disagreed with Louis. Later, Louise de Lafayette comforted the king, but Anne's public mocking of her hurt both Louise and Louis. War with Spain meant the court life became lonely for Anne, as her household became smaller. She often escaped to Paris, where she secretly contacted her family, like her brother the Cardinal Infante, as well as friends like Marie de Rohan. Richelieu intercepted these messages, prompting Louis to investigate. On August 17th, 1637, Anne admitted that she had been writing to her family, and she was no longer allowed to write letters without close supervision. Anne then realized that her future now depended almost entirely on her husband. One story describes that a winter storm on December 5th, 1637, forced Louis to stay at the Louvre, where he spent the night with his wife. What truly happened that night cannot be known for certain, but by January it became clear that Anne was pregnant. After more than 20 years of waiting and 4 miscarriages, Anne gave birth to a son on September 5th, 1638. Louis named him Louis le Dieu don, meaning Louis, the gift of God. The father visited his baby around 5 times that day, although people had to remind him to kiss Anne. Writers and speakers across France praised the birth of the newborn heir as a miracle, and Anne made sure to shower her son in love. Part 5. We are now at our last gasp. Beyond the war in Germany, France also fought Spain elsewhere. In May 1638, the Duke of Châtillon led 29,000 men to capture Saint-Omer in Artois. The attack failed because he did not block a canal that Spain used to bring supplies into the town. Spanish reinforcements under Thomas, the Prince of Carignano, relieved the siege in July. At the same time, the Prince of Conde attacked Fuenterrabía on the Bay of Biscay, with help from Archbishop Admiral Sordis. In August, Sordis trapped the Spanish fleet near Guetaria. His fleet destroyed 11 ships and killed about 3,000 Spanish sailors. Even so, the campaign failed. The French broke through Fuenterrabia's defenses, but never went through with the final attack. Fear spread through the army, and on September 7th, the soldiers fled in confusion. "I am so grieved about Fuenterrabia that it will kill me," wrote the Cardinal. In July 1639, France lost at Thionville, which got its routes leading into Luxembourg. Louis was present at the siege of Hesdin in Flanders, where Richelieu introduced Louis to Henri d'Affiat, the Marquis of Cinq-Mars, the 19-year-old son of a superintendent of finances. His charm, confidence, and good looks impressed both Louis and Richelieu. Louis ignored his selfishness, boastfulness, and promiscuity. Many courtiers found this surprising, because Louis had recently shown affection for Marie de Hautefort and other women. Instead, the 38-year-old king seemed to love Cinq-Mars more. Winning the war against the Habsburgs depended on finding enough soldiers and money, but both became much harder to get. The government called former soldiers back into service, and raised old taxes, created new indirect taxes, and forced whole communities to pay up, even if one family failed to. These policies raised prices, hurt trade, and pushed many ordinary people deeper into poverty, while tax farmers became rich. By July 1639, anger reached a breaking point in Lower Normandy. People feared the government would extend the hated Gabelle tax, putting the jobs of about 10,000 people at risk. On July 29th, justice official Charles de Beaupenel entered Avranches on business unrelated to taxes, but a furious mob lynched the Gabelleurs. This revolt of the Va-nu-Pieds, or barefoot ones, spread across Lower Normandy, growing to a size of 20,000. Their manifestos demanded the end of all taxes introduced since the reign of Henry IV. At the same time, higher taxes on dyed cloth caused riots in Rouen. In August, protesters killed a tax official, looted tax offices, and attacked the homes of tax farmers. Paris decided to send Colonel Gassion to crush the revolt. The rebels fled to Avranches before scattering. His soldiers looted the town and carried out mass hangings, while Gassion won praise for his harsh actions. Louis then gave Chancellor Segnier control as both the top civil judge and military commander in Normandy. By January 1640, Segnier entered Rouen, suspended the Parlement and City Council, forced the city to house and pay his soldiers, and demanded more than 1 million livres in compensation. With Rouen pacified under an iron fist, Segnier marched across Normandy, putting local nobles and officials in line. France renewed its alliance with the Dutch in 1640, capturing Arras in August after a 2-month siege, as well as retaking Turin. Richelieu also encouraged revolts against Spain. Portugal rebelled after the Duke of Braganza declared himself King John IV, while the Catalans revolted and gave Louis the title of Count of Barcelona in January 1641. Soon after, Catalan and French forces defeated Spain at Montjuic. To raise money and stop further unrest, the crown taxed church property and collected another 4 million livres. In February 1641, it forced the Parlement of Paris to accept an edict that stopped the Parlement from interfering in government, finance, or the military, without the king's approval. A great blow to the power of the Parlement, a powerful boon to the crown's authority. Around this time, Louis's relationship with Cinq-Mars was deteriorating. The young man's careless extravagance clashed with the king's disciplined piety. Cinq-Mars soon secretly worked with Spain against Richelieu, and was promised 12,000 crowns each month if he rebelled. In June 1642, Louis discovered the treaty. France captured Perpignan on the Spanish border on September 9th. 3 days later, Cinq-Mars was executed, the king not even shedding a single tear. Richelieu later died on December 4th, aged 57, from pleurisy. Before dying, he chose his faithful protege, Cardinal Mazarin, to succeed him as chief minister. Louis became seriously ill with intestinal tuberculosis in 1643, and named Anne as regent for their oldest son, while spending his final days praying and listening to music. He died on May 14th, the 33rd anniversary of the death of his father and the 33rd year of his reign. The day after Louis died, Spanish commander Francisco de Melo moved toward Rococo, a fortified town near the Meuse Valley that he called the Key to Champagne. France gave command of 21,000 troops to Louis II de Bourbon, the Duke of Enghien, the son of the Prince of Conde. Enghien wanted a quick victory, so he chose to attack Rococo directly, instead of waiting and cutting off Spanish supplies. On May 19th, the French and Spanish armies formed similar battle lines. Both sides placed infantry in the center, artillery in the front, and cavalry on the sides. Their first attack at 5 a.m. failed because the horses became too tired before reaching the Spanish. However, the French recovered and forced Spanish cavalry to retreat. They then attacked the Spanish infantry, with 3 Spanish tercios collapsing after heavy fighting, while 2 others kept fighting until they ran out of ammunition. By 10 a.m., France had lost 4,500 soldiers, while Spain lost more than 10,000. The Battle of Rococo ended the belief that Spain had the strongest army in Europe, a hopeful beginning for the 4-year-old King Louis XIV. The victory also strengthened Anne's government as regent. Many nobles supported her because they hoped to regain power they had lost under Louis and Richelieu. Anne removed some of Richelieu's supporters and brought back people who had suffered under him, including her friend Marie de Rohan. However, she surprised many people by keeping Mazarin as chief minister. She explained that his experience, especially with foreign affairs, made him necessary. By 1643, Louis and Richelieu had built a more powerful central government in France by reducing the independence of nobles, towns, Parlement, and groups like the Huguenots. France expanded into Artois, Lorraine, Italy, and Catalonia, while growing colonies in Canada, the Caribbean, South America, and Africa. Richelieu's policies also helped France move toward commercial capitalism, but many farmers remained poor, taxes stayed high, and war damaged many regions. When these problems reached their breaking point, revolts broke out. Many people praised Louis as an ideal ruler, extolling almost every role of virtue except being easy to like. Supporters believed this did not matter, because he put justice ahead of personal kindness. Though they struggled to explain brutal events such as the massacres at Nègrepelisse and the sack of Brevas, as well as his cold, distant relationship with his wife. Louis XIV grew up believing that Richelieu ruled France more than his late father, but without the partnership of king and cardinal, France would not have the foundation for which his son could build the most powerful state in Europe.